Hello, friends. Today we are going to discuss. Before I start, am I audible and visible?
Yes, both.
That's great. Thanks for the confirmation. Okay, so today we are going to discuss on the second part of Evolve Your Brain. So there are two chapters we are going to cover. So the first one, the fourth chapter is Our Three Brains and More, and the other chapter is Wired by Nature and Changeable by Nurture. Okay, so before we jump into, I think we need to have 1 minute gratitude to our brain that actually equips with the right mind. So for our happy living. So just like I maybe for a few seconds, 30 seconds, let's have a gratitude. Just close your eyes. Just be gratitude to your mind. Okay, actually the reason why we need to pay gratitude to our brain, of course it's not about just brain. I mean, we need to pay gratitude to all the organs in our body, to be frank, because they do so much of unconditional tasks without even asking for anything. Okay, I mean, it's just like a it's our courtesy to pay back our gratitude, to recognize their effort. Okay, before we jump into the discussion, I just want to give quick understanding, like, no, probably I think there are a few details which I have given earlier as well. So maybe people who has already attended or who has already seen the first video might have already known what is brain, what is mind. Okay, so brain is a machine. So if the machine is running, it's called mind, as simple as that. Okay, if the car is brain, the engine in the car is mind. Okay, so this is how, like, on a high level, what is mind and what is brain. Okay. If you see, before we jump into this, I'll just give some quick glimpse of how these facts and figures, especially regarding the brain. uh, if you see, our yogic science, when it evolved, it has categorized our human life into four categories: body, mind, what you call emotions, inner energies. Okay, so if you see, like, a body is something, that physical form that we see outside, the flesh, blood, everything. This is like, no, it's like a external layer of our human life. Okay, so body is nothing, like it's kind of what you call, it is intellect. I mean, what you do with your body. So it's, I can say, it's like a law of action. It's called karma yoga. And with the mind, what you do, it's like intelligence. I mean, how you do your activities, so on a regular day-to-day basis. So this is something like, what I can say, is like a jnana yoga, you can say, in yogic science. And the one with you do emotions. Okay, so that is called bhakti yoga. So that's how people pray God, we have idols in home, all those things. Maybe they are completely immersed into the devotion. That emotion is there actually in the devotion. And finally, we have the inner energies. So maybe I'll discuss that this topic in later, in any other session. So where we have all the nadis and chakras, which will actually align properly to ensure our energies are aligned and reach to a state of blissfulness. Okay, so basically, this is just a quick glimpse I just want to give. And one more thing, if your body is in a good condition, and if you have mastery over your body, your life is in control of 15 to 20%. Okay, but if you have mastery over your mind, you have 50 to 60% of your life in your control. And of course, if you're having mastery on your inner energies, 100% of your life is in your control. That means whatever you are going to decide is going to happen. Of course, we are not going to that level now. At least we can reach to the second level. At least if you are able to mastery over our mind, 50 to 60% of our life is in our control. Okay, so that's why I think we are here to understand what exactly this brain structure, how it is evolved, how many brains are there involved. I mean, we'll just go in detail actually. Okay. So the first chapter, which I'm going to discuss now today, is maybe if you guys feel too free, you can enable your video also, maybe just to have some lively session. If in case you have any objection, that's fine. So the one which we are going to discuss is three brains. Okay, so human brain is 6 times larger related to the body size than any of other living mammal, except dolphins, because even dolphins has a very close to their body size, the one like which we have for humans. So, but dolphin brain has not significantly developed from almost 20 million years. That means it's very stagnant actually. So, but human brain is always mystery for a lot of biologists. If you see how animal species the brain is evolved, so their brain mass enlarged in the same ratio as the lungs, liver, stomach, and rest of the body physical structures. That means as the lungs, liver, they're increasing their as per the age, their brain also was increasing actually. Okay. Early humans, we should have reached to a state of the brain development as other mammals did during the same period. But what happened instead? The human neocortex, it underwent onto enormous leap in overall mass and complexity within short span of time. I'll explain you. So briefly, like as I was mentioning, unlike other mammals, our human body size increased only 80% of the proportion in expansion to the mass of the brain. It's very quite deviation from the mammal to body brain ratio. Now let me ask you a question. Why did brain expand to such a great degree while the size of the head, rest of the body did not keep pace? As I mentioned, for like in the for other animals, the brain was increasing in ratio to the organs. If the liver size increasing, brain size also increased. And just for an example. So, but in our human body, what happens? Our our organs also increase, but is the brain also getting increased? No. Why? Because of course it is increasing, but it is not increasing to the same ratio. Because scientists believe that if the human head had grown at the same rate of increase, how the brain is increasing. So what happens? What is the consequence? If you see female pelvis, they'll not be able to accommodate infants' enlarged head actually during the birth, because our head will be growing enormously with the size of the brain, it is increasing. Correct. So even today, human birth is very risky because of this fetal's body size. So that's why no, it is very risky. It's about all nature creation. So how actually it has to fit in what size, what ratio, so that we can have the creation enormously smoothly. Nature solution for this to this need of a larger brain without increasing the skull size. That means our brain is increasing, but the skull size is not increasing. It is very mystery, right? So you might be under wondering, how come the brain is increasing without the skull getting enlarged? If you see our brain, it is a folded in itself. When you see a brain picture or anywhere outside, it is actually multi-folded. Correct. That means it is folded in, so that 98% of the neocortex is hidden within that folds. The new enfolded brain hides most of its gray matter and material. Maybe if you see walnut design outside when you go to a dry fruit shop, so if you take up a walnut, it's it resembles same as our brain. That means more material is accommodated in the smaller space. That's how it is designed. So brain folding and evaluation of the new brain, gave humankind a potential for mental growth that we have barely tapped even today. Okay. So present day, humans have still some proportional brain mass as we did 250,000 to 350,000 years ago. That means same proportional brain mass that we have even now. Of course, now let me just give a quick understanding of what are the human brain consists of. So it has 3 sub brains. If you see in the picture here, so basically when I say 3 brains, all the three brains are interconnected. Maybe those three are like interconnected biological computers, I can say. We are our main like no, we are a supercomputer, and all these are interconnected biological computers. So original names given to those three brains: archipallium, that is called as reptilian brain. If you see the other picture, right side. So this is a picture which has taken from the McLeod book, which who has written on a tri-union of evolution of a brain. Okay, so he has actually mentioned about the mammalian brains. Of course, we can also replicate the same thing for human brains. So here they mention as like a neo-mammalian. That means like where it is a neo-pallium brain in humans. That is a new brain. It's like a cortex. So another one is paleo-pallium brain. That is mid brain. Okay. So in mammals it is called paleo-mammalian. Okay. And the first brain, it's a archipallium. Maybe that's a reptilian brain actually. Okay. So it is a brain stem in conjunctions with cerebellum. If you can replicate, you can refer the same picture in the left side also. Okay, how the first brain, second brain, third brain are like actual structure. So if you see the first brain, the brain stem plus cerebellum. Okay, so the brain stem plus cerebellum, it consists of the first brain. The mid brain, it is the second brain. Okay, and the neocortex, it is a third brain. It is a new brain actually. Okay, the first to evolve, that is the first brain, as I mentioned, brainstem and cerebellum. 500 million years ago, this brain was evolved actually. It is in conjunction where the spinal cord connects to the base of the brain. So there was this picture which I showed earlier, like it comes as a cable, like from spinal cord, from the brain to the whole the spinal cord. Okay, so attached directly behind the brainstem cerebellum, evolved like it's almost 500 to 300 million years ago. And what is this first brain will do? First brain, actually it is responsible for the coordination. That means it's like an unconscious perception of movements. So when you do any kind of unconscious movements, all these things happening because of the first brain, brainstem and cerebellum. So cerebellum is the one which actually performs additional functions. Okay, because it is closely connected to the frontal lobe. Frontal lobe is like it's an area in the neocortex which is responsible for the intentional planning. Okay, and also it does all the complex emotional behavior. So the neurons in cerebellum are most densely connected nerve cells in entire brain. Okay, so now let's discuss. Of course, I'll just discuss more about all these brains in coming chapter in the coming slides. But I'm just giving a quick introduction of how all these brains are evolved and what is its function. So this second brain, what I mentioned is a midbrain, right? It is evolved 300 to 150 million years ago. It is like the first brain is a mammalian, reptilian brain. I mean, for an analogy, the second brain we can mention it one as a mammalian brain because it is most highly evolved in mammals. Okay, and there is the third brain. I was mentioning it's a new brain. It is like it got formed 3 million years ago. That means it just like it's very new actually compared to other brains. It is a very important component and it is called like neocortex. I can say neo means new. It is also called as a cerebral cortex because it folded itself around first two brains. That's why it is like it's a newly formed layer in the brain. It is set of our conscious awareness. Whatever we do consciously, all these things happening because of this neocortex. So let's discuss on the first brain little deep. So the first brain, as I mentioned, it is part of brainstem and cerebellum. Brainstem, as I mentioned, it is the primary support. It's a basic life functions. It includes the maintenance and control of our heart rate and breathing. It also regulates various levels of wakefulness and sleep. Okay, so cerebellum, as I mentioned, is a very little brain. If you see here in the previous picture, how is the structure of the cerebellum? It is very small in structure. It's called a little brain. Its wrinkles and folds give it a distinct look. Okay, so the very back of the skull, like it stays at the back of the skull. It's like underneath the neocortex. So recent functional brain scans, like where cerebellum and brains, most of the area which they have done. Okay. So the moment you see here, so what happens? So it performs like both a motor function as well as a braking function. I mean, when they have done the scan of the cerebellum, so what it like basically they understand. I mean, the scientist who has done the study on this one. So basically, it performs both a motor function as well as braking function. That is excitatory and inhibitory functions. And this is the brain which is responsible for balance, coordination, execution of controlled movements. Okay. Suppose if you take a certain type of simple actions, responses, like when you are learning, okay, any bicycle or anything like, so initially like it requires so much of effort, but once you learn that skill, so once you know how to ride a bicycle, what happens? You just require very little conscious memory to perform this action. Correct. Why? Because this is because of the function that is being given by the cerebellum. After that skill is learned, memorized, it is the neurons are actually wired very hard in the cerebellum. That means our body can perform the action automatically with very little conscious thought. Okay. So maybe like as I mentioned earlier in previous part also. So we have these hardwired attitudes, emotional reactions, repeated actions, habits, conditional behaviors. So all the skills that we have mastered over a span of time. So are all connected with respect to the cerebellum. Because of this cerebellum only, we are able to do all these kind of phenomenal things actually. Okay. And as I explained earlier, maybe in the previous part, the neocortex. Okay. In this neocortex, that is the first brain actually. So sorry, this is the third brain. It's a new brain. So this neocortex, it has average number of connections per neuron. That is 40,000 number of average connections for each neuron. Coming to compared to neocortex in cerebellum, there's the first brain. These neurons are called Purkinje's cells. So this is like somewhere between 1 lakh to 1 million connections per neuron. So it is very vast actually compared to other brains. So more than half of all the neurons that make up the human brain are actually contained in cerebellum. Okay. In fact, cerebellum is one of the few areas of brain where it's continues to reproduce long even after birth. So even after birth, it is continuously being like what is enlarged. It is being grown actually. Okay. So second brain. So this is the first brain as I mentioned. So cerebral cortex, that is like it's a gray matter as I mentioned. It's a neocortex, and so thalamus, pons, medulla. Of course, all these things I'll just explain when I explain on the overview of the brain. Okay. So let's just focus on the three brains now. So now the second brain. So the second brain is like as I mentioned. Why the name it has been given is like because the structures that make up this region, that because it is located directly in the middle of the brain actually, that's why it is called second brain. Let me just keep it the slideshow. Hope you are able to see now clearly. Okay. So the second brain, it is also called as limbic system. That means limbus means it's a forming a border actually around an edge or ring, and it pertains to something that is marginal or at a junction between the structures. And as I mentioned, second brain, it is also called as a mammalian brain because it is highly developed and specialized in mammals. Since it is situated above the brainstem, maybe in the previous picture which I showed, so it is situated above the brainstem. So on the midbrain in an adult human is about the size of an apricot. When you just take an apricot, it is just the size of the same that one. That's it. Okay. So although this brain occupies 1/5 of the volume of the brain, its influence on behavior is extensive because it is also called as emotional brain. Okay. Because that's why it is has a lot of effect on overall the brain structure. Sometimes we call this one as a chemical brain also, because emotion means nothing but actually it releases a lot of hormones, chemicals actually. Okay. So it performs many marvel things we usually take for granted. So maybe automatically it maintains, controls the body temperature, blood sugar levels, BP, digestion, hormone levels. It does everything automatically because of this midbrain. So without this, our metabolism is like a cold-blooded reptile actually. That means it will not have any more energy or activity going on. So midbrain It is also responsible for the fight or flight. So as explained earlier, I just told this is emotional brain, correct? So there is an automatic nervous system, which I explained earlier. So it originates in the midbrain and includes sympathetic nervous system, which actually kicks when we feel threatened. Suppose when we see a snake, when we go to bathroom, suddenly if we see a snake, that what happens? Your sympathetic nervous system in the automatic nervous system gets triggered actually. It will decide whether you need to fight or flight. If you are capable, you are going to fight with the snake and take it out from your bathroom. If you are able to flight, then immediately you close the bathroom door and you run away. That means this all decides in this midbrain actually. That's how it happens. So the moment you see a snake, what happens? You get scared actually. So that means like no, your conscious brain, that is a neocortex, it will send a signal actually. Okay, there is a threat happening outside. So what it will do? A fear is produced with the external stimulus, which is activated in the automatic nervous system. This one actually triggers your fight or flight response to prepare your activity accordingly. So an instant burst of adrenaline prepares your body to flee, because immediately what happens, your adrenal gland produces a lot of adrenaline hormones actually. Then it will actually help you to flight or fight. So when you do this one, the blood flow is directed away from your internal organs. Means like it will completely direct to your legs and arms. So where you need to take that action. That time digestion will not happen properly because all that energy is transformed to your hands and legs. So now let's discuss about the brain, overview of the brain. So as I mentioned earlier, before that, there is a spinal cord which actually connects. It is a fiber optic cable, I can mention. It is the one which actually, of course, it's a part of central nervous system, as I mentioned in the part one. Okay, so this spinal cord is like a fiber optic cable. It conveys impulses from the brain to other parts of the body and relays the messages from the body back to the brain. So this is very crucial, like in communicating the messages from brain to other parts of the body and from other parts of the body to the brain. So this is the actual mediator, I can say. This is a central place where actual communication happens, the spinal cord. Okay, so brain stem. So let me just help you about what is this brain stem. So as I mentioned, it is the first brain. It is the one which regulates the basic life functions, like as I mentioned, breathing, swallowing. So when you eat the food, okay, swallowing, and like a respiratory rate. So all those things happens because of the brainstem. And one more thing is cerebellum. Cerebellum is responsible for balancing, posture. So how you need to stand, how you need to sit, okay, how you need to sleep. So all these postures, the balance. So this body position is maintained in this cerebellum actually. Okay, and midbrain, it the second brain which I mentioned just now. It acts like chemical brain, that is emotional brain. So automatic internal regulation occurs actually here. So that means without our conscious thought, it happens actually. So it organizes the signals from external world with our internal world actually. Okay. So basically it is the one which actually respond to the external world actually. And next is thalamus. If you see here, thalamus, it acts as a junction box to integrate all incoming sensory information except smell. Of course, this is not part of this one because of it to various regions of conscious thinking of the brain actually. So this is the actual key part here. Next one is hippocampus. Hippocampus. Hippocampus is responsible for formulating experience with associated emotional memories, for processing vital information during learning. So when we learn something, it is the one actually which will associate some kind of emotional memories. So, well, the one which you, as I mentioned, when you're riding a bicycle, it will actually connect your emotions. Like no, if you have learned earlier, it will connect to that one. If not, then probably it is going to connect to the new memories that is going to form in future actually. Okay, that means it's going to encode long-term memories. Next one is amygdala. It works with hippocampus to generate primary emotions from external perceptions and internal thoughts. Okay, emotionally charged, like no, what I can say, to warm up about our vital sensory information. This is very important actually because this is the one which is emotionally charged. Next is hypothalamus. It is chemically regulates body's internal environment because the conditions like as I mentioned, body temperature, blood sugar levels, hormone levels, This is the area where all these things are happening because inside our body because of this particular part, hypothalamus. Okay, pituitary, it gets orders from the hypothalamus to secrete hormones in the form of peptides that circulate through bloodstream and activate different glands, tissues, organs in the body. It's like a pituitary gland is very, very powerful. Actually, like this is the master gland, we can say. See, when you feel stress, when you are angry on someone, what happens? This pituitary gland, it will immediately instruct the hypothalamus, hey, the body is in stress. So let's then actually it will prepare to create stress hormones actually. Okay, that stress hormones, what it will do, it actually disturb the whole body. I mean, there are some feel good hormones like dopamine, all those things. It will impact on our immunity system actually. Okay, it has different effect on the whole system. Okay, so this pituitary gland is very powerful. Next is pineal gland. Pineal gland, I think if you can see here, it's very small actually. It chemically regulates levels of sleep and the cyclic rhythms of procreation and mating. Okay, because if you are not having proper sleep because of this gland, okay, so this gland is responsible for you proper sleep, cyclic sleep actually, daily night at a certain time, like you go to bed because of this proper functioning of this pineal gland. Next is corpus callosum. This is like a band of fibers. It connects the two hemispheres of the brain to exchange information. We have left hemisphere, right hemisphere. Of course, I'll discuss this in the next slides like that. So this is very crucial in exchanging information from left brain to right brain. Okay, cerebral cortex. This is the seat of our conscious awareness. It is responsible to carry out sophisticated functions like learning, okay, remembering, creativity, invention, voluntary behavior, etc. So all these things are happening because of that. So next, feeding. As I mentioned, so our midbrain fighting, or fleeting. Maybe it is also like feeding. So when you sit down and have a meal, your parasympathetic system in the automatic nervous system, what it will do? It will actually relaxes you. That means it will conserve your energy. It will prepare the body for your digestion and metabolism. Next, fornicating. That is so both parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, it has, which is part of the automatic nervous system. This is the one which actually plays to lift your mood actually. The later one, it actually turns on when you have that organ. Let's say suppose how they relate to sympathetic and non-sympathetic nervous system. Let me just quickly explain you. So sympathetic nervous system, as I mentioned, it is responsible for 4 F's: fight, flight, fright, fornicating. That means any of this action can happen. And parasympathetic nervous system, it is responsible for few F's like feeding, fixing, probably for the growth and repair. Okay, so this is how it actually happens, and these all things are part of central nervous system because this is the one which conserves, builds, and stores energy. Next one, structures of midbrain. Please stop me wherever you feel you wanted to have more details or if you have any clarification. Otherwise, at the end we can have FAQ questions. That's not a problem. I'll give some time. Okay. So structures of the midbrain. So midbrain consists of thalamus, hypothalamus, pituitary, pineal gland, hippocampus, amygdala, basal ganglia. All these things part of midbrain. Okay. So thalamus, the name, it is derived from Greek word. Okay. It is called inner chamber. It is the oldest and largest part of the midbrain. Okay, just think like an analogy as switchboard. Okay, so this is a meeting point for almost all the nerves. Once this switchboard is clicked, that means immediately behind the switchboard, all the electric wires, the current get passed. So I mean, a lot of things happens actually. That means it is the meeting point for almost all the nerves that connect one part of the brain to another part of the brain. So the body to the brain and brain to the body. Thalamus is very important. Next, sensory organs. It sends messages to the thalamus, which relays them to their to find the destination in neocortex. Okay. Next, it's like a hypothalamus. As I mentioned in the midbrain, so it is a chemical factor actually. That means it regulates body's internal environment and balances your system with the external world. That means it is under the thalamus, but it is the one actually responsible to secrete all kind of chemicals actually. If you are feeling happy, if you are feeling sad, all these emotions are actually secreted here actually. I mean, with the help of hypothalamus, it generates all the chemicals whatever is required for the entire body. So its main job is to make chemicals called neuropeptides that keep the internal affairs of the body in balance with respect to the external world actually. So if you are happy, that happy chemicals has to be produced to make sure it is in line with the external world actually. You cannot be happy and sad at the same time. That means when you are happy outside, you cannot be sad inside. It will be in aligned because the chemicals are aligned actually accordingly. It controls and manages bodily functions like appetite, thirst, sleep, wakefulness, and blood sugar levels, body temperature, heartbeat, whatnot. Like, all these things, immune system reactions, metabolism, sex drive, maybe all these things happens because of this wonderful function happening in the hypothalamus actually. Okay. So when you see a snake, as I mentioned, so this, because of these sensory organs, it will pick up the rights. It will see, your eyes will see the snake, and immediately your ears will listen the sound of the snake moving and making the hiss, all those things. And immediately what happens, this thalamus, it will quickly tells your brain, hey, there is a snake over there. I think we need to pass the message quickly. Then it will declare all the sensory signals. Hey, eyes, you see there is a snake here. Let's act quickly. So then it will send the message to all the other sensory signals throughout the body, and at the same time, it will coordinates with the entire body for immediate action. Okay, and what happens? It will send the information to neocortex. That is a higher conscious brain centers in neocortex. This is the one which actually take decisions. Of course, the processing happens in other parts of the brain, but neocortex is the one which actually decides. Okay, so whether it has to go outside the danger, or it has to face the danger, anything. So it makes the decision, it plans the action, and accordingly it will make the quick exit, or it can fight also. So thalamus is the one, as I mentioned, it signals hypothalamus to chemically prepare your fight or flight body functions so that your body has a proper energy to respond to the threat. Same time, you don't need any blood flow to the digestion. So the next one, in the structure of the midbrain, pituitary gland. It is the one which actually secretes chemicals that activate your body's hormones. It is a very complex actually, as I mentioned, it is the one which initiate and regulate the activity of an organ. It is a group of cells in another part of the body actually. That means it communicates with another part of the body very effectively. So it's various glandular tissues of the body that actually secrete various hormones, as I already mentioned. Suppose for thyroid gland, adrenal gland, reproductive organs. I mean, all these things. It is a master gland which controls all the vital functions actually. Okay, so hypothalamus you can mention as it's like a chemical plus electrical signals to the pituitary, which actually make this one as a very effective one in the body. As I mentioned, because it's a master one, this is the one which actually controls the whole system. Okay, this is a responsible one. So pineal gland, I think, as I mentioned already, it is a small brain, and it's very tiny in shape, a pine cone. If you see the structure, that's why it is called the pineal gland. It sits in the back of the brain actually. Okay, it is actually, as I mentioned, it is responsible for the sleep, all those things. It is the brain internal clock. That means if you subconsciously decide at what time you need to wake up, this is the one it is going to help you actually. Okay, and because two neurotransmitters are produced actually in this one. Serotonin is a daytime one. Melatonin is a nighttime neurotransmitter. So these are the transmitter. So it will prepare the body to experience and restore sleep happily, and during the hours of darkness, and cause the brain to dream. So this is the pineal gland. So we are getting a lot of dreams because of this pineal gland. Next, hippocampus. Hippocampus actually makes long-term memories. As I mentioned, the name came from the Greek word sea horse. So that's how the name came. So we learn new experiences and form memories, and thanks to this, because it classifies incoming information as short-term and long-term what you call memories. The short-term memories, suppose if you want to remember it for a short time and forget it later. Suppose if you want to do a shopping today, it is not very important for your brain. Maybe you can forget it later. Maybe if you want to remember a phone number of a friend, maybe after that it's not required, or any other new stranger, something like that. Any short-term memories, details like can be captured here. And what are the long-term memories? Suppose if you want to access something very repetitively, like suppose if your house address, your spouse name, this is very important. Maybe people who are not having good long-term memory in their hippocampus, sometimes they even forget their spouse birthday. That's why a lot of fights happen in their homes. Okay, so I think you need to be very careful, especially in this part. So hippocampus is responsible for the short-term memories and long-term memories. So this the type of memory encoding that takes place here called associative learning and associative memory. Suppose imagine a child throws rock at a beehive, okay, and then receive multiple stings from the bees. It is a novel experience for the particular child. In future, that child remembers, oh, earlier I had hit the bees, it had stung me, it had hurt me. So then it will remember in the brain actually. Okay, so all those things, whenever he see a bee, immediately he'll remember everything. Okay, all the throwing of the rock, sight of the bees, how it has a sting, and how it was painful. So all those things are actually stored as long-term memory. Okay, because it creates memory of personal events, and it is associated with the things that already happened to us at a particular time, place, everything like that. And it's a new experience, and for all the senses. That's why it is created as a new memory. And next one is amygdala. So amygdala is as I mentioned, it is a almond shaped. Okay, it actually altering the body in survival situations by bypassing other circuits. This is the place which actually helps our body to alert. Okay, there is a threat happening. You need to take an action immediately. So this is the one which actually triggers amygdala. It will store all the four highly charged primitive emotions, if you are very aggressive, if you are very happy, if you are sad, fear, all these are attached to the long-term memories, and all these primitive emotions are stored in this amygdala area. So in life-threatening situations, activates the body to respond even before your conscious level, even before you think that there is a danger. This one actually do even well before that. That means it actually prepares. There is a danger. Then only you are consciously knowing that okay, yes, there is a danger. Before that, there is a lot of happening inside the brain actually. Okay, suppose you are riding a bicycle in the park while listening to a MP3 player. Suppose you are mesmerized by a melody. You are listening to A.R. Rahman song, which is you are so involved into that, and you are just going having a ride with a bicycle in the park. Suddenly, a small boy comes in front of the cycle from the bushes. Okay, then what happens? Right in front of your bike he comes. So your amygdala immediately receives this vital information and bypasses your neocortex. Bypassing the neocortex means neocortex is the one which decides, right? But here, before your neocortex decides, your amygdala, that is the second brain, it will actually make you to hit the brakes. Immediately you hit the brakes. Why? Because before your conscious memory acts, your subconsciously there is actually one which actually triggers this one. So even before your conscious actions are taken care. That's why if you see a mother is sometimes she's very aggressive to defend her offspring. I even heard one of the article earlier. A child she was struck under the lorry or some tractor. I think I don't remember exactly, some big vehicle actually. So the one single lady, she has lifted the whole tractor with her hands. Usually in a normal situation it is not possible actually, but when we decide something very danger happening to our body or to our loved ones, we take any risk to any extent. Why? Because of this amygdala. This is very powerful. That's why you need to untap the potential, because it can do anything wonders. Don't just believe what you are doing consciously. There are a lot of things happening without our knowing. Only these incidents will reveal that. Okay, because of these extraordinary functions of our brain actually. Because as a child protect her as a mother protects her child from the horrible situation, even though situations are against her. Okay, next one is basal ganglia. So this is the one actually which integrate the thoughts and feelings with our physical actions. It is situated in each hemisphere of the midbrain. under the neocortex. So how it actually works? So if you recall a time when you were learning a skill involved muscle movements, like if you are riding a bike, you need some kind of muscle movements, correct? So here actually what happens in the beginning, you need to think consciously. Once you are done, then everything happens subconsciously. So every time you practice, you reinforce your neural circuits in your brain that what you call that relate commands to your body relating to the balance coordination. So no need to tell again, so how to balance the cycle, so how to pedal it, how to apply the brake. So all the things are already learned actually. So that is nothing new actually, because you have repeatedly learned actually so many times. Okay, so that's why this is able to do it. So these neural networks became hardwired. That means it's very strong actually. Okay. So your movements in pedaling the bike and keeping your balance become automatic. So no need to think again. So okay, now there is a right coming. So you'll not think, okay, I need to take left turn. Okay, if suddenly some car comes, what should I do? I need to apply. It happens automatically. Okay. So at that point, your basal ganglia, what it will do, along with your cerebellum, it will take over the coordination of those automatic movements. So how these automatic movements are happening? This basal ganglia, along with the cerebellum, it is taking care of all this activity. So what happens if it malfunctions? Okay, so people with Tourette syndrome, like suppose there is some uh, improper function happening. That means they are not able to coordinate their thoughts and feelings with their actions. So like there are a lot of mentally challenged people. If you go to any hospital or any other special hospital, so mentally challenged people. So basically, their thoughts and feelings are not in coordination with their actions. They are doing something, they are thinking something, and maybe they are not in align actually. These people often lose inhibiting control over their impulses. They feel overly anxious sometimes. They display uncontrolled behaviors. They show all mad behaviors. Okay. So some people have overactive, what do you call, expressions. They are sometimes they are overwhelmed by minor stress. Even a small thing in their life, they feel like over stress. Suppose even a small, suppose even this coronavirus, if you see like what happens. Suppose your neighbor has this virus, or if your neighbor, any other apartment, nearby apartment has this virus affected, so immediately this person, he gets overstressed actually. Okay, what happens if it comes to my family? If what happens if it comes to me? And actually he keeps on thinking, and he for nothing, for no reason, he keeps himself overstressed actually. Okay, because the basal ganglia is not working properly here. Okay, this is a simple example what I can say. So when we are sitting with a group of people and someone can't stop bouncing his leg up and down, if you see, like when a couple of friends who are sitting on a wall, okay, and a couple of friends actually what they'll do, they'll move their legs up and down, tuck 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 tuck. Why? Because they're like some overactive. They do some kind of over expression, because his over is a bit. So next time when you see a person who is overactive, who expressive, you can say is basal ganglia is hyperactive. You can mention like that. Okay. So because this is the one which actually discharge anxious energy. Okay. So next one, it is a third brain. So let me explain you here actually. This is the most recent brain, that is the neocortex, because it is a center of awareness. So when our brain is actually performing so-called higher functions like reasoning, planning, learning, so creating, analysis, communicating, so that means this neocortex is functioning. It's actually working. Okay. Without neocortex, our senses would still be alert as to the fact that we are cold, but we could not proceed further. So if this neocortex is not working, you suppose if you are touching any hot furnace or any cold substance, that means you don't feel anything, because there is no communication. There is nothing happening inside your body. It is just like a plane. You just be like very normal. That means it is not actually working. So neocortex only allows to interpret the sensation of being cold, whether it is cold or hot, and it will choose multiple options to remain cold. That's why immediately you close the windows and actually you put in a sweater actually if you are feeling cold. If you're not having any kind of reactions, that means your neocortex is having some problem. So you can decide like that. Okay. So generally it is said like male brain is larger than female brain, okay, by more than 100 cubic centimeters. Male brain is larger than female brain by just 100 cubic centimeters, maybe about the size of a small lemon actually. So the size is like it is bigger in size. So the new brain, what I mentioned, it has a inner supporting layer and outer supporting layer. So if you see here, neocortex, okay, the inner brain. So what is like it is of shape in orange shape. The outer layer of the cortex, it is what you call the skin of the orange. Okay, if you take an orange, the what you call the pulp inside the orange, that is the inner supporting layer of the new brain, and the outside layer, what you call the skin of the orange, it is called the outer layer of the neocortex. The part of the new brain what we are actually referring here is most often is the outer layer, because so the neocortex are cerebral cortex. Because this is called as a gray matter. When we say like his gray matter, like is very dense, is very like super intelligence, so we are actually referring to the outer layer of a neocortex. So although it is only 3 to 5 millimeters thickness, it is very rich in neurons. Aside from cerebellum, as I mentioned, the first part in our brain is cerebellum, which has 1 million to, I mean, very large number, 1 lakh to 1 million neurons. Of course, this neocortex, it has some 40 to 50,000 of neuron connections. So this neurocortex, it is composed of several parts. The corpus callosum, it is like a fiber optic, maybe. Okay, so it is not covered. Okay, fine. You can see here. So maybe the corpus callosum. Okay, the picture here. Yeah. Okay, corpus. Okay, so this is the neocortex, which is composed of several parts. The corpus callosum, it is a fiber optic bridge. Hundreds of millions of neurons. It actually connects two hemispheres of the new brain. If you see left hemisphere and right hemisphere, so it's like left and right cerebral hemispheres are connected here actually, because these hemispheres are responsible for controlling the side of your body. I mean, like the complete your body. So cerebral hemisphere are not separate structures, because corpus callosum joins the two halves of the new brain. Okay, we see here in the picture corpus callosum, it is actually combining both the hemispheres. So it is very crucial here. It is a fiber optic bridge, as I mentioned. So the four neocortical lobes, the two cerebral hemispheres are further divided into four separate regions known as lobes: two frontal lobes, two parietal lobes, two temporal lobes. Maybe all these lobes you can see here actually. Okay, so two frontal lobes, two parietal lobes, two temporal lobes, two occipital lobes. This is very important. I want you to just focus more a little bit here. So frontal lobes. Frontal lobe is nothing but this is the place in the neocortex which is responsible for your intentional actions. Okay, so you are focusing our attention and coordinating nearly all the functions in the rest of the brain. Okay, this is the place. Next is parietal lobes. It deals with the sensations related to touch, okay, and feeling, coordinate some language functions, visual tasks, etc. Okay, next is temporal lobes. This is the one which actually process sounds, perceptions, your learning, language, memory, and all those things happens here actually. Okay, next is occipital lobes. It will manage the visual information, that is visual cortex. So each has its own separate function. When your visual cortex is functioning happily, effectively, that means you are able to see, the vision is very clear. That's how. Okay, so the parietal lobes, it is like it is located just above each ear and they extend to the top center of the head actually, reaching the midline of the brain. It is the sensing region of the cortex, I can say. This is the process what we feel with our hands, bodies. It is called as somatosensory perceptions. Okay, so we receive the information from two somato, that is like body, and how we feel through sensory in the brain. So the pain, the pleasure, the pressure, light, touchness, all those things are integrated in the somatosensory cortex of parietal lobes. Next is what you call environment. and sometimes from our internal environment. Okay, so inside our body also there might be some signals. Okay, and these peripheral nerves, what happens, it will converge from different areas of the body, from hands, arms, legs, everything actually. So most important point to remember here is entire map of how the body feels can be charted in sensory cortex of brain. So this is the place where it happens actually, specifically in this parietal lobes. Next is temporal lobes. It is just under the surface of slightly above each ear. It is the responsible for auditory perception, how we actually process what we hear. When we hear and when we send some communication, so like what happens, our eardrum inside our ear, what it actually gets vibrated, and as a result of our sound waves hitting it, it will produce some electrical signals that travel along the auditory nerve to individual components in the temporal lobes. This is the one actually which deals with the language comprehension and decades uh, some kind of meaning, what exactly that is being interpreted. So this is actually involved in storage of some types of memory and facilitate making of long-term memories, like as I mentioned earlier. Actually, this actually take place in hippocampus. Okay, long-term memories. So when there is a damage to both the temporal lobes and hippocampus, many people cannot form new memories. That's why like people who are mentally retarded, that means their both hippocampus and temporal lobes are not actually working in full function. Okay, so it is also having association with a visual center that links with your emotions and memories. So it is a storehouse of many of our visual and emotional memories. And occipital lobes, it is the vision cortex. As I mentioned, it is the one actually which decides how to process the data from outside world in order for us to see coherently. See, like there are 6 different layers interpreting visual qualities. So like light movement, like the shape, the depth. So when you take any stone, like if you see what is the shape of the stone, how hard it is, what is the size, so like all those things, it is decided like because of you are able to see in your visual cortex in this occipital lobe actually. As visual information is passed from the eyes to this occipital lobe, it is processed in a cascade of nerve reactions from the back of the brain to the front through these 6 different regions. This is why a blind sighted person, if you see, like, he could still interpret reality through his visual field. Though he cannot see, he can actually visualize through his visual field. This information that made it to his primary visual cortex was passed to adjacent areas, which were activated for further processing. Because when for a visually blinded person, what happens? This information is passed to this primary visual cortex, which is which is functioning, but like no, it is not functioning in full form. So though he could not consciously see an object, but actually he can actually perceive, he can actually feel it through all the other sensors. Oh, what is the shape of the stone? Though I'm not able to see the shape of the stone, but actually can sense, okay, this is in round in shape, okay, this is in rectangle in shape, so something like that, some kind of sensations he can have. So like where the object came under the aspects of vision. So though he cannot see, but other senses he's able to see everything because of this occipital lobe actually. Okay, next is frontal lobe. So if I ask, where do you think, how do you dream, how do you focus, how do you concentrate, how do you imagine? So maybe the simple answer for all these questions is this frontal lobe. You will most likely point to the area on your forehead and just above the bridge of your nose. Okay, this one, this you can say this is the frontal lobe. Frontal lobe is like a resting place of conscious awareness. Whom we are most conscious, most aware, our frontal lobe is at the height of the activity. Okay, it is also our self-awareness. When we born, it is most highly evolved area in the brain, because it is the place where our self being can express itself. The back part of the frontal lobes, like suppose as I told, it's the frontal lobe. The back part of the frontal lobe is home to the motor cortex. That means which exists as a neighboring slice of a cortical tissue. So this motor cortex, and with the help of sensory cortex, like they actually divide the parietal and frontal lobes. So motor cortex, what it will do, it will actually activates all of the voluntary muscles in body and participates in our voluntary movements. So when you are riding a bicycle, when you are going to a gym, This motor cortex is the one which actually helps you to voluntarily coordinate all the muscles. So we activate this motor cortex when we need to take some determined actions, okay, or when we want to control some purposeful movements. So the frontal cortex also extends all the way back to the temporal lobes, where intentional speech is initiated in the language centers. Just in front of the motor cortex, it is an area called premotor cortex. It is responsible for mentally planning all our future actions. That means you are actually rehearsing your intentional actions before any actions are actually carried out. As I mentioned earlier, so when you want to plan something about your future of child, everything. So first, an intentional action is rehearsed actually in this area. Okay, this is the brain area that is most active during our important periods of consciousness. When you want, suppose when you are giving a public presentation, when you are giving a kind of a very important discussion with your manager, so this is the area which is most active and which is very high alert actually. So in this compartment, our true uniqueness as human beings actually exists. So like suppose if you want to test drive as a new neocortex, so as I mentioned, like it is a seat of executive mind. It is a CEO of the brain actually. Okay, so it does everything. It gives the intellect to create new ideas, new behaviors, and it is a new enormous in size, and it is the one which helps us to become as an unique individual personality. Okay, this is the one which I actually do. So this is what, like, now I just want to explain all the things in the brain. I think we have covered the first chapter, but I'm sorry, like I have taken a good amount of time. So I need to jump into the second chapter. Maybe I'll just quickly wrap up in maybe 20 to 25 minutes. If you're okay, I can continue. Else, I can take it into a differentiation. What do you feel? Shall I go ahead and clear it up, or do you want to take in next session?
You can go ahead now.
Okay. So now next chapter is like wired by nature, changeable by nurture. Okay. So our mind can do only what the brain is equipped. As I told, brain is a car, mind is the engine. Okay. So the engine, we cannot fit what you call Audi engine to a Maruti Alto car. It does not fit actually. Correct. Because the car has to be equipped properly with the right engine, and the engine has to be equipped with the right car. Then only it actually works. Okay. So for most of us, what we find out is like the kind of brain we has before we understand how our behavior is works actually. According to Greek philosopher Aristotle, what he has mentioned, the brain of a new baby is it was a blank state. Okay, that's what he mentioned. But let's decide whether this analogy is right or wrong. Okay, because he mentioned there is no record of any experiences with which we begin our journey in life. That's what Aristotle mentioned. So humans are born like with some kind of functional circuits in the brain that can show some specific behaviors given the right stimuli. But and also we gather information from our environment through senses, and that senses play a part of in the development of the mind. Brain may be pre-wired by genetics, but it is then subjected to the stimulation of the environment. Okay, so how is this brain development happens? Okay, so let me just explain very quickly. Our primary force in shaping up the brain development is genetic inheritance. That means from your parents, from your grandparents, so all your ancestors. Okay, so when a pregnant woman is like having some kind of external and internal environment which is very strong actually, then it impacts in the fetal brain development. So there are two areas. One is genetic inheritance, one is external environment. Okay, external environment is like when responding to the external stimuli. So example, when a expectant mother lives under extremely stressed situations, so what happens to that infant? That infant will have smaller skull circumference because of this stressful situation which his or her mother has. Okay, and it has very less synaptic connections in the forebrain. And what I can say is like what happens in the second trimester. Okay, so let's just mention here. So just 4 weeks after conception, what happens? So a human embryo is already producing 8,000 new nerve cells every second. Okay, for every second it will produce 8,000 new nerve cells. From second trimester to third trimester, our brain makes almost 250,000 neurons per minute. It's very huge actually. Okay, at the end of the first trimester, okay, what happens? Trimester, beginning of second trimester, our fetal neurons, it develops dendrites. Maybe in the part one I explained actually dendrites. Dendrites is the receiving place of the neuron. Axon is the sending place of the neuron. When some message has to go from one neuron to other neuron, these are the one which has to take place. Dendrite is the one which receives the information. Axon is which sends the information. Okay, just remember these terminologies. Maybe you can just refer it later. Okay, so this dendrite, which actually develops in the fetal neurons, establishes the synaptic connections with the neighboring neurons to form the neural networks. So, like we have our innate intelligence in our body, which begins to form the architecture, like which actually supports functions of our brain, our mind, and consciousness. Sometimes it's very tough to believe the theory of blank slate theory, because as Aristotle mentioned, there is nothing when you are born, nothing like that, because it might have come from it might have formed some neural network because of our ancestors, parents, grandparents, everything like that. It cannot come very blank actually. That's what this author has mentioned actually. And next, third trimester. So it's like an enormous increase in the total number of nerve cells happens during this period, because during this trimester, the fetal brain develops, refines all structures or region that makes up the adult brain and make human brain distinct from other species like other animals. At this time, baby processes more brain cells and synaptic connections than it will ever have throughout the normal like life. It will have lot of nerve cells that gets created. So these are essentially raw materials with which our child begin her life long process of learning and change. So this is the foundation when we what you call, when you construct a building. So how you have the foundation, so that foundation should be very strong. So for our human life, this is the foundation actually happening for the learning. Suppose imagine the fetal brain is like a new business. So when we are opening a new business, what happened? We are going to hire some unspecialized workers, because it's very tough to get specialized workers when we start very new actually, when the technology is new, when that work is new. Okay, so nobody seems to be in charge of to tell them where to go, what to do, because everyone is new, even the boss is new and even the worker is new, so no one knows what to do, so they're just doing their activity. Slowly they start forming connections to other employees, so they'll form departments. Okay, HR department, what you call finance department. So they form actually different groups actually, and they try to take out the activities. So later they form the networks of employees who have found some specific useful tasks to perform. So same way, like the survival of the company depends on health of its network of groups and the total number of workers. These employees, as mentioned, who get together fastest to join those networks, able to stay in the company. So as I'm mentioning here, suppose there are people who are performing very good, they are going to stay even for the next year. Else, they are going to be fired off. They are going to remove from the company. In the same way, the neurons, which are actually energy and which are able to exchange information at the very faster rate, they are going to stay there. Else, our like it is going to replenish, it is going to take away, and we are going to replace with other memory, other neurons. So the neurological survival of the fittest is called neural Darwinism. So the only neurons which are actually fit to be there in the brain, it can stay there. That is called neural Darwinism. So next we have birth age 2. Okay, after child is born, so what happens? 67% of calories she consumes are used to nourish her growing brain. Okay, so new genetic synaptic patterns are continued to develop actually. So at a very incredible pace, as the infant begins to have some experiences. So like some kind of her senses gather vital information from her external environment. So some stimulation happens to the sensory input that, like, no, she receives repeatedly will cause her brain to develop strong synaptic connections. Suppose like a young child, if you remember, if you see, they'll pay very special attention to the voice of their mother. Okay, they'll pay very keen attention to the voice of their mother. So they're connecting the familiarity of the voice heard for 9 months in the womb, because they have heard the voice of her mother for almost 9 months in the womb. That's why when they come out, they feel familiar with the voice of the mother actually. So as the baby repeatedly exposed to the same visual, auditory, sensory information from her mother, it will actually identify her mother face with voice. Okay, she's my mother, and she recognizes actually. This is the first stage of learning. Okay. Also, a baby can hear every sound that an adult can hear. However, only words repeatedly that is being heard from our mother. So it will have the constant foundation of child actually in the native to have the native language. Suppose like if the mother is speaking continuously in English, child native language might be in Telugu or Kannada or in any other thing. But what happens? Even though the child is occasionally hearing her mother speaking in different language, so it will actually it will start getting into her subconscious mind. I mean, it will start speaking. That particular infant will start speaking. Suppose like one NRI, one guy from America, he has adopted a child actually of our. Suppose I'll take one example like suppose from Andhra, from Telugu place, like where he has adopted a Telugu infant. Okay, he has taken to Austria or Germany, anywhere. Okay, and before 2 years, I'm just telling. Okay, a child is adopted before 2 years. So in the family of Austrian, like no, what they'll speak only German. They'll not speak Telugu, right? Okay, so they'll speak only German. So when they're speaking German, so that mother actually she's speaking continuously with the child in German, with her husband, all the thing. So the child will only listen only those German words actually. That means he will not speak Telugu in his lifetime. He will speak only German. Even if after 3 years, all ABCD also in German only. He will not even remember that he is from Andhra. Okay. That means within 2 years, if you are able to talk to your child in a different language, it is very easy to have that language equipped with that child actually. It's very simple actually. So that's why it happens most of the times. When a very young infant looks at faces, what happens? They may see only black and white patterns actually. See, when you go to hospital for any of your friend who has delivered a baby, when you go to hospital, the baby she'll be doing, she'll be just looking like this. She'll be just staring. Why? Because the infant can only see black and white patterns. It cannot see in colors actually. Though we have a lot of makeup and our complexion is fair or black and white, anything or what you call red color, white color, whatever it is. But the child can see only the shapes in black and white. Whatever you show, hey Chintu, see this, like no, this is very beautiful lorry car toy, but the child will not understand, and it will see only black and white. That's why he will always stare like this, as if there is something surprising, like no, he does not understand what's going on actually. Some different shape actually. Okay, because as genetic progress prompt her brain to develop further, her neural circuits become refined, because later again here our neural networks will be defined. So like early childhood, by age 2, the what you call the human brain approaches its adult size. So like weight, number of okay, so the weight, number of nerve cells, it actually increases by age 2. The what you call it actually generates very more number of synaptic connections which are present in the neurocortex at this age. So puberty, then mid what you call puberty to through mid 20s. Okay, so what is like at puberty, the corresponding chemical hormonal changes will cause structural changes in the brain. Okay, during the adolescence, what happens? Your nerve cells related to the emotional centers in the midbrain are activated and developed. So at the age 12 in boys and the age 11 in girls, neocortex thickness increase. Okay, so this is the age where they are actually entering to the teenage. So at this final stage, the first areas to finish developing are the sensory and motor cortices. That means it involved in sight, hearing, feeling, movement actually. The parietal lobes, which I mentioned earlier, it actually finished mapping some of the final patterns of what you call language, spatial orientation, all those things. The last area to complete its development in the brain is prefrontal cortex. It is responsible for all of our executive functions, such as paying attention, planning the future, and regulating behavior. Okay, this is the one. The completion of frontal lobe develops in the midbrain and necessary, like no, and it's the last ingredient for the brain to reach adult maturity. So, like once we are matured as an adult, this is the frontal lobe which actually develops to its fullest extent. So during puberty, we have very strong sexual drives, powerful emotions, impulsive behaviors. That's why if you see a lot of complaints we see from teenage children, because their hormones are at peak level. They are out of their control a lot of times. Okay. So, and they have increased energy levels. In fact, human brain is extremely neuroplastic. As I mentioned in the part one, neuroplastic is the ability to change our brain. Okay. So by persistent learning and having new experiences, so where we can modify our behavior, we may continue to remold and shape the brain throughout our adult years. So what are the qualities that make us human? Okay, what are the qualities that make us as human? So many animals see the world in black and white. As I mentioned, how the infants see, like they see black and white, right? Even now, a lot of animals, they'll see the world as black and white. Okay, the human, so like how humans see the world in color now. So neurologically, because the ability to process visual stimuli is very strong in our visual cortex. We eat and digest in same fashion. We share same common sleep cycles. Even animals sleep at night time. I mean, most of the animals, like they will also eat and digest. They will also have some kind of spoken language. Cat will say meow, and dog will say bow bow. Like they have their own form of communication. Actually, okay. Everyone of us experiences different emotions. Even they feel sad, they will also feel happy. It depends on, like if you see a pet dog, it feels very happy if you just pat on her head. Actually, okay. Even it has same emotions. So how did we come to acquire the blueprints that make us as human? When we have so much similar, what makes us very special human? Because our brains, it is truly memory of the past. Okay, so our brains truly memory, as I mentioned, of the past, shaped by our species adaptation to its environment over million of years. So if you see the throat, the further evaluation of our own species, the neocortex has recorded the totality of our learned experiences through eons of events. It is encoded as a neurological framework. As I said earlier, in neocortex, there are some mapped patterns of neurons that are actually pre-assigned to our ability to use our verbal language, how we are actually performing. There are actually some pre-mapped patterns through genetic inheritance, as I mentioned earlier, or through response to the external stimuli. That's how it actually gets it. Only these two areas, how actually our brain develops by gathering information. So what are the traits that you can see here as an individual? So when we actually discussing how our brain develops, we're we said that both genetic inheritance and environment shape us as an individual. How you see, like if you decide how you are right now at this age right now, because it is because of the intelligence from your parents, and it is intelligence from the information that you are gathering from the outside world. That's how you are being here. So how we became unique individuals? Okay, how does that particular you develop? Why does one person have behavioral traits of aggressive, another person is very shy? Why some people excel in verbal skills and other excel in aptitude or for mathematics? Okay, why do we differ from another in how we perceive the world? So why is so much difference happening? Actually, there are a lot of hangama. Okay, so why this is so much happening? Why? What makes a difference? Okay, these individual expressions of human nature may partially result when one male plus one female combine their genetic information in the form of DNA. Okay, so the individual expressions of human nature may partially result when one male plus one female combine their genetic information in DNA. So this reproductive blending of male and female genetic material, it is the one which creates an individual who actually inherits the short-term genetic traits from both parental gene donors. So in other words, what I can say, we'll ultimately become like our parents most of the times, because it actually inherit from the genetics. Actually, we are not born exactly like our parents, because each of us has inherited some unique combination of our parent. So like we'll take some portion from our mother, we'll take some portion from our father, we'll take some portion from our grandfather, from grandparent. So actually, we'll take everything and we'll combinedly make a different individual. We are not exactly same, but we reflect actually some portion, and we make it as a unique. So we are actually likely to inherit certain aptitudes and emotions that our parents demonstrate in a like in a general way. Suppose if your mother has repeatedly held thoughts and suffering, both mentally and physically, like no rehearsed or complaining. Suppose if the mother is always complaining mode, complaining on others, okay, and blaming others for everything, and master the art of making excuses for everything, she is more prone to be synaptically wired equal to her most repetitive intention. That means she's repeatedly doing all those things. Okay, so all those consistent rehearsals will become reinforced neurologically to the infant also. Say it is very true actually, and from both parents we inherit genes that specifically direct the production of nerve cells in the brain. Okay, so the hierarchy of brain organization. How is the hierarchy? If you see here, the hemispheres, as I mentioned, left hemisphere and right hemisphere, we have these regions, all the lobes, okay, which you can call this one as a compartments. So like it is made of individual columns. If you see here, different compartments are there actually in the brain, in the picture, what I'm seeing here. It is made of individual columns and neural networks. Why is the brain organized into subregions and compartments in the first place? Let me tell you. These communities of neurons, what I mentioned earlier, were actually nominated to perform specific functions that are common to every human being. So each neuron has specific function that is nominated. Okay, therefore different geographical parts of neocortex have become specialized for mental. So there are mental function, cognitive function, motor function. So there are different neurons which has to perform different functions. That's why we have different compartments. So humans are wired to pursue the consistent familiar environment stimuli we have been exposed to over millions of years. We have been wired to process that information in specific compartments of the neocortex so that we can actually experience what has already been formed, stored, encoded. Okay, because of this help of these compartments, we have specialized collection of neural networks. See, like how we are having in a company specialized departments, finance department, marketing department, like that. In brain also there are compartments, like where it has specialized collection of neural networks. So for learning a special language, there is a separate department. For giving a presentation, or for taking care of your daily activities, I mean, for different activities, different departments of compartments takes care actually. And if you see here, compartment, what does a compartment means? Compartment nothing but it's a specialized collection of neural networks. They can be both universal or individual. Universal means actually we are all inherently have almost the same regions of cortex. That means in all the human beings, we'll have same kind of compartments. It is not like the person A has different compartment, person B. Compartments are same. It's a universal truth. It's a universal fact, I can say. And the other thing is, in compartment, we can have this individually defined actually in that same particular compartment. So how well we actually diverse our personalities. So like, we can actually, how we can process, it depends on the person, what you call neural network in that neocortex, depend compared to the next person. So depends on the neurons in that particular compartment that makes the person special from the other person. Okay, brain is a highly interactive organ, as I mentioned. So what we are learning so far about neurons, synaptic plasticity, their ability to reorganize is quite remarkable actually. Okay, because the brain is not so linear that, like, what I can say, it can have over area, it does not affect to other areas. Suppose if there is any damage to one part of the area, the brain actually, like, it will not affect to other areas. See, suppose like in normal healthy humans, the thought process does not take place in disconnected segments. That means we experience we smoothly with the connected transmission. That means we think, like, in align with our actions, like for a healthy human being. So our nerve cell impulses, it will converge or diverge. When they diverge, they spread outward using individual modules. So we can now build a greater understanding of how actually learning, cognitive processing are related. Through learning and experience, we actually create more integrated nerve cell connections. So where we have the synaptic patterns that can facilitate greater diversified thought process. Actually, when you are actually encoding new knowledge, suppose if you want to learn a new language, that means actually you need to encode knowledge and you need to have a new experience to the brain. So when you repeatedly learn that new language or new knowledge, what happens in our brain? Our wired connections is becoming very hard, and upgrading the brain like upgrading a computer. Suppose you are upgrading your Windows, upgrading your computer. The same way, how you need to upgrade your brain, you need to feed with novel information, new information. That's why you need to keep on learning. That's why we tell we are a learning, we're a student for a lifetime. Okay, we are not just teachers, we are students for lifetime, because we need to seek learning. We need to keep bombarding with new information to our brain. Okay, so it's like a computer hardware, I can say, except that individual human beings are unique in how each person process cognitive information. So where do we analyze complex mathematical equations? Like some people are very strong actually. If you see Shakuntala Devi, she's very strong in her mathematical capabilities, equations. There are a lot of people who have showed excellence in their fields. So what is the region it is responsible for this divine inspiration? How do we learn? Where exactly does this identity exist? Let me answer you for this question. It actually depends on the way in which the sub-regions of the neural networks coordinate to produce different levels of mind. Okay, so sub-regions in this particular compartment where we have a lot of neural networks. So how they're actually coordinating to produce different levels of mind. So the key to understanding how different areas of the brain work together to produce the mind is to think of them as components of symphony orchestra. See, when a musician is playing a music orchestra, there are a lot of instruments. Okay, we just close your eyes, you can see only you can only listen music. But if you open your eyes and see, the musician is coordinating with a lot of other musicians, other instruments, and finally he's producing an outcome as magnificent tune, as a sound actually. Okay, the same way our brain also, it has a lot of compartments, subregions, lot of neural networks. In everything is some kind of symphony. Okay, everything is happening. That's where one thought. So when one thought has to produce, everything has to be symphonily orchestrated like inside, then only the thought will come. Okay, we know how to expand our definition of a neural network. A neural network can be broadened to encompass many different components and subregions. Okay, it's this is how it is being defined. So if you see our nature, and versus nature, nurture. So scientists, a lot of times they have debated. So our brains actually sculpted to be either through genetic inheritance or through our environment. So what determines our what you call the hereditary or environment? Let's talk about a few things on nature. So our genetic inheritance is a combination of long-term genetic information and short-term genetic information. Long-term means it's it is common across all the species, where all the emotions will be same, like all the things, as I mentioned, the pattern. So short-term genetic traits like from our parents, from our grandparents. So it gives you as an individuality. So both are very important, genetic and what you call external environment stimuli. And this is our nature. What is nurture? Our individual environment and life experiences. So in addition to our genetic inheritance, what has shaped, in other words, like what I can say is, the brain over million of years is what we have learned and experienced from interaction with our environment. So what is the information that we have stored till now, right from childhood, teenage, the adult, till now? How the brain has adapted to that particular information, what we have stored. Okay, the brain evolves not through nature or nurture, but by a remarkable interaction of both these process. It's not just one thing actually helping our brain to develop. So environmental circumstances can also derail aspects of a person's genetic potential. Suppose if a child has parents, both are physicians, he may also carry the genetic potential of being super intelligent in that particular knowledge, physics. Okay, if a mother is exposed to a noxious drug during pregnancy or experiencing high level of stress while carrying a fetus, so the child's genetic blueprints may be overcome by his unhealthy environment in the womb. Also, inadequate nutrition can also adversely affect. Suppose if you are not taking proper nutrition when the baby is inside the womb, obviously when the baby come outside, it will have some defects. So the neurological problems will arise. So in order for the brain to learn new things, what you need to do? You need to keep in mind that learning involves making new synaptic connections. It needs some existing connections to be replaced with additional new connections. Every time we learn something new, we are forming actually additional neuro connections. So what is our first stimuli? As I mentioned, first environmental stimuli when a newborn is came out of this world is exposed to the parents' voice and parents' what we call conversations. So from infancy to adolescence, a child will model behavior like based on the social interactions with his environment. So what other people are doing, how the environment actually behaving, so all those things. So this is possible because of mirror neurons, because in our human body there's a mirror neuron. This is a type of neuron which actually imitates this behavior. Like, okay, now this wide, if you see like in olden days, we have these gurukulas. That means the teachers, they take the children from the parents and they do all the education for almost 10 to 15 years. In that way, what happens? So like they're actually taking out from the influence of the parents. You got it right. So that's why they're going to create a new neural pattern actually, okay, with the greatness. So the wide brain is like nothing but a plastic brain. So both genetics and experience I just discussed, like those are very crucial to make up how our brain is developed. In humans, this recorded experience, like as I mentioned, the memory, the learning, what you are doing, everything is mapped as synaptic wiring that reflects who we are. So learning allows us to change. When you actually started to learning something new, something is changed in your brain. It takes place when nature is nurtured. So every time we learn something new, the brain processes the information through senses and makes new neural circuits that encode the neurons, the memory of what it has learned. Okay, so you need to remember this terminology, neuroplasticity, because this is the capability that gives our brain the ability to change its synaptic wiring. See, please don't get disappointed. So, okay, my life is like this only. I cannot do anything good. Like, no, this is my fate. So I'm born like this. I'm born to be like this. You should not never ever think like that, because your brain has the capability to adapt, to change to a different way of formation. That means, suppose you cannot speak, you cannot give a good presentation, public presentation. You cannot all think like that. I am not fit for this presentation. I cannot give any good presentation. No, you need to immediately enhance the capability of a neuroplasticity. That means you have the ability to change. Yes, I have the capability to give good presentation. So you need to give some positive affirmation. If you do this positive affirmation, what happens? Your brain will have the ability to create or change the synaptic wiring. So it will change the existing wiring and it will form a new wiring actually to create a new result. So this is our innate universal long-term genetic feature in our humans. This actually make us special from the animals. Animals cannot do like this thinking. Okay, only humans have this kind of innate genetic feature. So where you can change the current situation and make it a different one. Without this ability to change or evolve, we will be the victim of our suppose if we don't have this capability, we'll be very dull and we'll be victims of our genetic predispositions. We'll always tell, okay, because of my father I'm like this, because of my mother like this. So they'll always be in blaming mode actually. Okay, if an area of the brain is missing out an environmental information because one of the sense organ is not working, suppose another region of the brain will compensate with the lack of stimuli. Okay, suppose you might have seen like a blind person, they're not able to develop acute they're not able to see actually, but what happens, they develop acute hearing or enhanced perception. See, there a lot of people, you know, right? So the blind person, the physically challenged person, they have the exceptional perception thinking. They have so much of exceptional hearing things. Why? Because when we compare the scan results from a normal sighted person to a brain scan of a blind person, so when we compare this both brain scans, what happens? So basically, like, the blind person, he uses his fingertips to read braille, correct? So the braille letters he reads constantly with his fingers. So very repeatedly he keeps on reading with his fingertips. So then what happens? The much larger compartments in the brain sensory cortex light up actually. That means in sensory cortex, one compartment gets light up actually. What it will do? Because of constantly paying attention, repeatedly applying the brain to that particular portion, it started begin to reassign new areas to compensate for the change in type of stimuli. Okay, the fact that the brain of a blind person will map new dendrite connections in the visual cortex. Dendrite connection, as I mentioned earlier, it is the receiver connection of the neuron. Okay, when we see a matchbox, that person cannot see, but actually it can feel. Okay, this is a matchbox. Okay, initially he might not know, but after a few touchings, like after knowing that one, so okay, he can feel. Okay, matchbox look like this. Okay, laptop looks like this. Okay, and pen looks like this. Maybe he can have all these things, because the reason why it happens is this is like, there is some kind of neuroplasticity that happens inside the body, where the dendrite connections in the in the virtual cortex, for it is replaced for the eye actually. Like that means it will have the sound. For him, the feelings of sound, the perception, the hearing itself is called visualization. It itself is called a visual cortex for him, because he cannot see with his eyes, but he can see with his mind. Okay, that's why he's able to do all these things. So this is a fine example which I can say of neuroplasticity, because actually we are overriding genetic program. Neuroplasticity is that means we're actually blind person. If he thinks I'm lifelong blind, I cannot do anything, he cannot sit like this, right? He'll think like, let me learn. There are a lot of people who actually graduated law, who even do surgeries actually. There are a lot of exceptional phenomenal development happening even in the blind segment, like people who are not able to see. Because of this neuroplasticity, they have actually changed their destiny. They actually overrided the genetic program. So that's how we need to take that inspiration. So like how it is hardwired by nurture, hardwired by nature. So when the neural networks are hardwired, they're actually automatic program. So once they are actually turned on, they require little or no conscious effort. If you remember the first example I told, bicycle. Initially, you might put a lot of conscious effort, but once you know cycle, once you know the car driving, once you know motor riding, you don't actually put more effort actually, because your neurons are actually hardwired. Okay, when it is hardwired, it is very tough to take it out. Okay, equally, when you are into a bad habit, suppose you are addicted to drugs, suppose you are addicted to negative thinking, suppose you are addicted to something like very bad habits, any bad habits, that means it has a positive side and a negative side. Suppose like if you are addicted to drugs, that means your neurons are very hardwired actually. That means very tough to come out of that addiction. You need to put a lot of conscious effort to come out of that addiction actually. Okay, if you take it to positive side, it will give positive results. Negative side, negative results. So then hardwired neurons, it will give a strong connection actually. Okay, so the brainstem and cerebellum, as I mentioned in the first few slides. So the first subbrain actually, and the middle brain. So the first brain and middle brain are more hardwired than neocortex. Suppose if you want to be very strong in some area, if you want to decide something very strong, your first brain and second brain has to be very strong. Just remember that. Okay, because our first and second brains, because it has evolved very long actually, some 500 million years ago, 300 million years ago. That's why they are very strong actually. Okay, they have some old memories, everything. Their neural clusters have stronger synaptic connections because these patterns have been around longer for years. Because the neurocortex is the newest brain for most species, including humans, it has only few hardwired programs. So the neocortex, it's like a new brain actually. It does not have so much of hardwired neurons. the frontal lobe is the least hardwired of all. So frontal lobe, I am mentioning this one. It is the least hardwired of all actually, okay? Because it is the most recent one neurologically. The neocortex is most malleable because it serves as the stage of conscious awareness. It is the one which memorizes, learns. It facilitates our ability to think, act, and choose differently and records what we have consciously. It is the area actually we grow new synaptic connections. Neocortex is the place where we go new synaptic connections and modify existing neural networks. Okay, and like the last section of today's meeting, it is a selection and instructions. Okay, so how is the process of selection and instruction actually happen? The term selection, what does I mean by here? How we develop by using our neural circuits that is already there in place of our brain. In other words, suppose like when a normal healthy baby reaches a certain stage of development, see, he does not need to tell like, okay, I need to crawl now. After crawling, I need to get up and walk. After walking, I need to run. Nothing like that, because there is a selection of neural patterns happen inside his brain that child actually picks from the environment and it will initiate the process. A genetic program in the baby's brain is triggered actually. Okay, it is triggered from the more pre-wired neural networks. It is already there inside for him. It is nothing new. Okay, so which cause the baby to crawl. So the premise of selection is that we develop when these pre-existing neural patterns become activated, and these are activated by the environmental stimuli also, some signals. When we hear some sound, baby look like this from where the sound is coming. So because it is already developed, the such kind of vision cortex, some sound cortex, all those things. Okay, if selection is all about neural networks that are already in place, then what is that instruction? Instruction is very important. It is the process where we develop new circuits or modify existing ones. It organizes the synaptic connections to what we are learning. So this instruction is very important, that it is our ability to neuroplastic enough. So we need to give repeated instructions for our brain to modify our mental architecture. Okay, we do this by repeating our thoughts, our actions. So when we do repeatedly all these things, how we do it, what we learn, how we think, so it is going to change over a period of time. So a newer, more aware mind is created by making additional new circuits in the brain. Okay, because you have been instructed for years on how to play violin. Suppose like if you are playing violin or any instrument for 10 years, you are playing like this. That means a new skill has been formed in your mind, because it become as a pre-assigned mental neural network in your brain. So no conscious effort is required. So an accurate description of how we develop most involve both selection and instruction. So we have a pre-assigned area already in place in the sensory cortex for neural networks that process hand or finger movements, selection, and actually how we actually enhance those circuits. So when you want to learn something, you need to select from the environment or from your genetics or whatever it is coming. Then you need to instruct. Instruct is very crucial if you want to change your old habit. Okay, I think this is what I think I wanted to cover everything. Maybe I'm sorry, like now I've taken more time, but it is something very detailed I wanted to give you. I can share this PPT and recording session as well. Probably some five minutes. We can just have any quick questions and answers. Like I can clarify it here. Feel free to discuss.
Yeah, thanks, Srinivas, for such a wonderful session. You have told that our subconscious mind is hardwired, and new cortex is not much hardwired. So is it like that we can change our conscious actions frequently, but it is difficult to change the habits in subconscious mind? So
correct. So what happens is like the reason why I mentioned is the first brain and second brain, it got evolved almost 300 to 500 million years ago. That's why when it formed long back, there will be already some neurological networks which are already formed actually. Okay, from so many million years it has formed. That's why those are hardwired. That's like we call it as subconscious. And the one which is formed is a new one. It is just recently some 1 million years, like I can say. So it has formed. So it is called neocortex. So the reason why we wanted to say here is we can have this kind of a flexibility, as I mentioned, neuroplasticity. Okay, this is the one actually which can have the capability to make the hardwired wirings to form in a positive or negative way. Suppose, like as I mentioned, your frontal lobe, that is your neocortex, the new brain, it does not have the capability to be very hardwired, but through your repeated actions and constantly applying all your what you call thinking patterns. So even your frontal brain, that is frontal lobe, what you call, even this one also, you can actually make it hardwired, because this is the one which is actually consciously doing. So when you are actually doing, when you are going for brush, that means you are consciously not aware, but like you are subconsciously doing all these activities. Okay, so this is both are interlinked actually. Your conscious brain has to help your subconscious brain and to make this thing happen. So when you are talking about hardwired neural network, that means you in your subconscious mind, it has to be hardwired actually, because there is no point of being hardwired in conscious brain and it is not hardwired in subconscious, because it is the one which it has to trigger the automatic program. If you want to do automatically, your conscious brain should not work. That means your like when you're driving a bike or car, everything, you should not think, okay, now which pedal I need to press, now which gear I need to press, like that. Whenever you see instant thing, it is automatic, everything happens. So hardwired wire neural network happens through subconscious, but conscious brain actually, it will complement, actually it will help the subconscious mind to have this program.
So by repeated action, we can hardwire it.
Exactly, repeated action, we need to have some kind of a novel experience. So it's like, we need to upgrade our brain also, as I mentioned, our computer. So we need to repeatedly have this novel new experience. Suppose if you want to learn a new language apart from what your mother tongue or whatever you know in your office, so then actually it is a new experience for your brain, because there is no neural framework existent in the, suppose if you want to learn a German language, there is no existing neural network connection in the brain to have that language. That's why you struggle a lot actually when you learn a new language. But you repeatedly start learning, then suddenly what happens? Your brain forms a pathway. Okay, neurological pathway. Okay, this German language is not new. This is very new, old for you. So you can actually do anything wonders actually. Then actually you feel very comfortable because a pathway is already established.
One more example you had given, that if a children from Tamil language goes to Australia and he learns German language in 2 years. So suppose the father is speaking in German and mother is speaking in Telugu. So whether he will learn the German language or he will continue to have.
So the first priority will be voice of mother. Like irrespective of your sibling, irrespective of your grandfather, irrespective of your father, whatever language they speak, whatever the language the mother is speaking is very important. Because if the child is from German, if the mother is from Telugu, if mother is constantly speaking Telugu language, the child cannot speak in German. Of course, if the father is speaking in German, even still the child, because the child is familiar with the mother's voice, because 9 months the baby was in the womb actually, so it has already developed some kind of neural sensory connections with her voice. So when she come out of the womb, she can immediately relate to the voice of the mother actually. That's why whatever the mother is speaking, it's very crucial before 2 years, so she can immediately learn that new language.
And after 2 years?
After 2 years again, like almost like the adult brain expands, the lot of neurons get increased. That time, like it's very tough to change the existence structure. Maybe of course we can try our best, but it is not so easy to have that language. Suppose the mother tongue is like what you call, if a mother is speaking in whatever language, the Telugu. So maybe if the boy is in German, maybe it feels very little difficult to come up to have that language. Okay, it will take some effort actually. It will not be so easy compared to a child who is less than 2 years. But definitely he'll speak, but it will take time.
Okay. And can you go to your second slide where you have shown the brain, parts of the brain?
Okay, this one.
No, next one. Yeah. Can you explain this thalamus and hypothalamus
Okay.
and pituitary?
Okay, so the thalamus is nothing but, like as I mentioned, it's like a folder, I can say, and the hypothalamus are the files in the folder. Okay, because hypothalamus is the one actually who is taking care of doing all these chemical reactions, chemical secretion. Suppose whenever you are feeling sad, when you are feeling happy, this is the place which is actually secreting that emotions, so the chemicals, happy emotion, happy chemical. Okay, because this is actually instructed by pituitary gland. Pituitary gland, what it will do? It will instruct, hey hypothalamus, please secrete happy chemicals, because the person wants, because the person is feeling happy. I want to send him some happy chemicals. Then immediately what it will do? It will send the happy chemicals. Then immediately, suppose if the person is feeling stress, then what the pituitary gland will tell to hypothalamus? Hey, the person is feeling stress. You need to you need to send some stress hormones. So then immediately it will send some stress hormones. Accordingly, all the glands will get activated. Your adrenal glands, your thyroid gland, or your other respiratory gland. So all the glands will get activated and will produce the result actually based on that one.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome. So anyone else have any questions? Anyone want to have any clarifications? Vasu, I can see Ketaki, Jilan. Is everyone fine? Amit, Gopal are fine. Okay, fine then. I think I don't want you to wait for a long time. Thanks for attending the session. Maybe I'll share the recording later to just go through that when you have some time. So this is for now. So winding up for the next session again, like now let's meet and discuss the later part of the brain. Okay. Thank you guys. Have a nice time. Thanks for joining early morning. Okay. Have a good day.
Thank you for immense patience.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks. Thank you. Bye.